Welcome back. And today, for the first time in quite a while, we're honored to have a very special guest, independent scientist Leuren Moret, coming to us from Berkeley, California. Welcome back, Leuren.
Thank you very much.
Well, the last time, or one of the last times that we spoke about the Fukushima event, and this is quite sobering, uh, you had determined using peer-reviewed Center for Disease Control data that there were 100,000 unnecessary deaths in the U.S. alone in 2011 due to Fukushima. And I remember calling up Dr. Sanjay Gupta's office at CNN and asking them about that data. And Dr. Gupta was out that day, but I spoke to his executive assistant, and she said, "Well, it has to be peer reviewed." And I said, "Well, it's Center for Disease Control data," and she was totally flummoxed.
Yeah, I bet
Uh,
she was.
yeah. So now coming back for this update on the impact of Fukushima, you've been telling us that you're noticing actually deformities beginning to appear uh, that you would like to report on due to the Fukushima nuclear false flag event on March 11, 2011.
That's correct. And what we do know is that the Centers for Disease Control reported that 17 babies just in the city of Berkeley had died from the Fukushima radiation between March 11th, 2011, when Fukushima occurred, and June the 18th, just 3 months later. So that was an immediate response. That's a baby a week, about one baby a week. And all I could think of was the heartbroken mothers and families. And of course, mothers always think it's their fault, or, you know, God is mad at them, or they really take it very personally. And very few people realize what the real cause of these excess unexplained deaths are. Uh, by Christmas of this last year, 2012, I was walking up and down the streets and riding on buses in Berkeley, and I noticed a very large increase in toddlers and babies with birth defects of the eye, hair lip, um, Down syndrome. And I even got on the bus one day, and there was a little toddler, a beautiful little blonde girl, who was born at the end of February, just before Fukushima occurred, maybe 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before. And she was a dwarf. And she was about a foot and a half high. I didn't actually see her stand up, or maybe 2 feet. And she will never be taller than that. Her caregiver, a very nice older woman with her, told me. And we're just seeing more references to birth defects, to breast cancer, to people like Angelina Jolie having double mastectomies because her mother had breast cancer. When I went to a women's cancer conference in Oakland about 4 or 5 years ago, there were the top cancer experts from the Lawrence Berkeley Lab in UC Berkeley. And the woman who did the experimental research on rats and mice, giving them breast cancer, she said, "I'm the mouse lady." And she said, "I use ionizing radiation to give my study mice breast cancer, it's the only known cause of breast cancer. She did not even know what she said and revealed because she was actively involved in the University of California cover up through their public health department of these large increases in cancer and other radiation related illnesses since World War II. So more recently now, this is October of 2013. This is, let's see, March. It's 2.5 months, I'm sorry, 2.5 years after Fukushima. And what is being reported now from British Columbia, New Hampshire, Minnesota, and states in between is that there's a very alarming and very rapid die-off of moose, the moose population in that region along the Canadian-US border. And I watched HAARP being used from March until the end of August of 2011, when all monitoring stations, all information, data, everything by government agencies was suddenly no longer reported. And that is when cracks started appearing in the ground between the reactors at Fukushima, and radioactive steam was coming out of those cracks. And of course, it was too late for any really effective response. So it's just been a cover-up since the end of August, the beginning of September of 2011. And that estimation of 100,000 Americans dying from Fukushima radiation exposure by Christmas of 2011, 9 months after the Fukushima disaster, was based on Centers for Disease Control data. So we know there have been large increases in deaths in populations that have even been targeted, as I was saying, I saw from the monitoring stations, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty stations that are independent of governments, and they were reporting the truth, and they were showing graphs and videos daily of the plume movement, and it was very clear that fluid dynamics was being used to guide these cold, dense plumes of cold air loaded with radioactive materials from Fukushima, guided across the North Pacific directly into regions that they wanted to depopulate. And the Canadian-American border, the northern border of the United States, was one of the major targets. So these moose, now that hair is falling out of them, they're almost bare-skinned, some of them, and they're dying of starvation and very strange illnesses. They're covered with an infestation of ticks, and they're very poor health, and their immune systems are damaged. So these would be parasitic opportunities for insects to come in and really feed on them. I'm sure that over the months ahead and the years ahead, we will also see large increases in radiation-related illnesses and deaths in the same regions that these moose are reported to be rapidly dying. It's something like a 75% reduction in some of the moose groups, populations, within just a couple of years. So that has to be explained. That's unexplained deaths. And always we want to look at unexplained deaths and try to determine the cause. And when you start mapping disease by geography, that is a very effective way to identify the cause. Now, just reported in mid-October is a very large crash, a troubling mystery. It's the complete collapse of the sardine population on the west coast of Canada around Vancouver. And an official said it's unexpected, and experts said humpback whales are rarely seen. They're telling us something has changed. Nobody knows what's going on. Well, of course, the governments know what's going on because they're covering it up. And there are also in the Oregonian reported at about the same time. It reported also sardines in the waters around British Columbia disappearing, and it's a collapsed $32 million a year commercial fishery. So this is not just impacting the wildlife and the fish in the ocean, it's impacting people's health and also the economic productivity and health and vitality of local economies. Other things that are happening is that a whale biologist with the Pacific Wildlife Foundation, interviewed by The Sun in Vancouver, said that the humpbacks typically number in the hundreds near the west coast of Vancouver Island in the summer, but they were only sporadically spotted this past summer. And that indication by the humpbacks is indeed confirms that there's a problem with the disappearance of the sardines as well. Now, there are also problems with starfish and jellyfish that are turning into a horrible goo in the ocean, and no one has explained that either. I have a very good article, very in-depth. It's a Japanese site, it's a blog, and there are very good maps in it for the extent of the radiation and the levels of radiation mapped for the whole northern Pacific. And I can send these to you, and you can put links in them when you post this article. So there's a map for the radiation levels across the whole northern Pacific 731 days after release, and another one for 1,096 days after release. And this radiation is heading for the shorelines of the entire northern Pacific. It will affect Asia, the Arctic region, and Alaska, and all the way down the Pacific coast below Mexico. So there's no way to escape. There's no way to stop it. We're in a covert nuclear war against humanity. There's no doubt now whatsoever in my mind, and with the documentation that I've compiled and confirmation from various sources and agencies. And it's not just happening in the animal population, it's in the human population too. And there are photographs of koi, the Japanese fish, like goldfish, with defects. There are other types of fish with defects of the tail, the spine. And what's really interesting in this article is that there are a number of conjoined embryos of fish before they're born. So this conjoined twinning, I have mapped it all over the world, and it definitely correlates with areas where the monsoon of Southeast Asia is raining out. And this is across Africa, across the Atlantic into South America. Something like 5 or 6 presidents of South American countries have come up with cancer in the less than 10 years. So I mapped the monsoon rainout, and those incidents of cancer in the presidents of those countries correlates with the monsoon rainout. We also have conjoined twinning reported on the west side of the Andes. This is where the radiation would be carried from Iraq, Afghanistan, Australia, and it's rained out on the steep slope of the Andes as well as snowed out in the winter. So the fingerprint of Fukushima is definitely global now. I guess they also have in this Japanese article pictures of deformed mice, deformed bees, insects, and other sea life. So there it is. We have conjoined twinning reported in Afghanistan, but more clearly in Iraq, where in the towns where the biggest battles were during the Iraq wars. Now, what is the result? What is the impact? Another impact on humanity. It's a very sharp decrease in fertility in women. This is global. It's also true in animals as well. The first test tube baby, if you remember, that was Louise Brown, who was born in 1978. By 1990, there had been 90,000 births resulting from fertility treatment. In 2000, the figure stood at 900,000, and in 2007 at 2.5 million. Since 2007, there have been about 2.5 million children born using assisted reproductive technology. So what we have now is the very words of Bertrand Russell, the philosopher who taught at Oxford in the 1930s. And in the book published in 1952 called The Impact of Science on Society, those are Bertrand Russell's speeches that were put together, compiled in a book and published in the 50s. And he said in the 1930s that their goal, the New World Order, I call them odor, goal was to sterilize 95% of the males globally, 60% of the females, and that the fertile females would be expected to reproduce from the age of about 20 until they were 40. And Bertrand Russell himself said to, quote, to produce cannon fodder for our wars, unquote. So there we have the malice and the venal, deliberate mutilation of all living things and depopulation of the global population, which clearly is what their goal is. And they've actually been planning this since even the 15 or 1600s. In the book called Labyrinth of the World by an Englishman, he stated that it was a novel. He said, and they were sitting amongst themselves, trying to figure out how to cause a global catastrophe that would kill many, many people around the world. Nothing's new. All these are very old games, going back into even prehistory. Now, going back to the infertility in women, they've come up with a new technique in England to boost the in vitro fertilization success in women, and you can now get a half-price IVF, in vitro fertilization, that takes 1 hour to get pregnant, and it uses far fewer drugs, which is really interesting and could be done during a woman's lunch hour, is what the title of the article is. But basically what they're doing is giving women much lower doses of hormones, and they're having much greater success in a larger number of successful in vitro fertilization births. And that is because hormones that are not produced by the mother at a rate that is evolved over thousands, millions of years, when they're artificially made and they're artificially introduced into a woman's body, they actually cause birth defects, problems with in vitro fertilization and normal natural fertilization, and they reduce the success of IVF because of overexposure to hormones. I think that's really interesting. I've never heard about that. And what's very interesting is that this article says those women aged 35 to 45 have had the greatest success, and this new IVF treatment has been particularly good and very high success rate for them. So, now, do you have any questions or comments?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so much information coming. I just wanted to ask you. There's there's the information that we've heard about the island, the radioactive island of debris from Fukushima that is making its way across the Pacific and that has started to hit here on the outer reaches of Vancouver Island. And I wondered if you could update us on that and on its impact.
Yes, actually, Christina Consolo and I have done a very good interview. It's had a really big impact on the celebrities and directors in the Hollywood population who in the last year or year and a half have bailed out of their homes. There are over 1,000 of them who just moved out of Hollywood, lock, stock, and barrel, without even selling some of their houses for many of them. And they've relocated to the Southern Hemisphere or Europe or places where they could go and survive and thrive. So also Malibu High School, I believe, yes, Malibu High School has a large increase in cancer recently. And that was reported, that particular high school, as buildings that were called sick buildings. In other words, there were probably chemical toxins in them that have been causing health effects for 5 years. But now, over the last couple of years, the added toxin from the tsunami debris field and carried on winds and rained out along the Pacific coastline has mixed with the chemical toxins in that high school and increased the effect of chemicals and radiation mixed together, which is called synergy. When they're together and combined, they multiply the effects of each other by at least 10 times. So even smaller traces, even smaller levels, lower levels of chemical and radioactive toxins, when they're mixed, they can be extremely lethal. Very, very dangerous. Did I answer your question?
Yes. So that they're going to be succeeding increases in impacts as this island continues to hit the West Coast.
Yes, and not only that, we just had in the months of August and September the Louis Vuitton world-class yacht races in San Francisco Bay. And that was for August, and in September it was the World's Cup, which is the America's Cup, which is the world champion yacht racing prize and races. Now they had a new kind of boat. Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle, got into sailing, and he put about $1 billion into developing this new kind of yacht to add to these races. Unfortunately, the only other country that could afford to have a boat like this, they're catamarans with very tall, uh, very stiff, rigid sails made from carbon fiber, and they are based on the ancient yachts, the ancient ships that the Chinese used for trade around the world. Um, they're astounding. They go up on little skis. The whole yacht does. It weighs thousands of pounds, and the sail acts like an airplane wing. It's like a wing foil, so that the speeds that these yachts reach are 50 to 55 miles an hour, three times the rate of the wind. The reason I'm talking about this is because this race was manipulated with HARP. And during the month that race was going on, the Oracle race, the Oracle boat racing the Kiwis, which was funded by the Emirates airline. The evening time where I live in Berkeley, which is right across from San Francisco, across the bay, in the evening, the cold air would come blowing, draining into the Bay Area. It was the middle of summer. It was September and October, September and October, the hottest months in Berkeley. And it's usually in the 90s and the hundreds. Well, I was wearing long coats down to my ankles, mufflers around my neck, and a hat and gloves most of the summer because it was so cold. It got even colder in September during that yacht race because very cold air, very dense air from the Arctic or from the Siberia and the Northern Pacific was being guided or directed down the Pacific coast to alter the wind speed and the timing of wind speed changes in the Bay Area to help to manipulate the winners of the race. Oracle won the race, which is hard to believe when they were behind 1 to 6 or 7. The Kiwis had 6 or 7 races they won. And all of a sudden, the wind started changing, and Oracle won every race after that and got the 9 races in just half a week or a week to take the cup, to keep the cup. So the radiation levels in the Bay Area before Fukushima were 0.07 to 0.13 becquerels. That's disintegrations per second. That was before Fukushima. After Fukushima, in the year after, in the 2 years after, the radiation levels in the Bay Area averaged 0.21 or 0.22 to about 0.26 becquerels or disintegrations per second. During the Oracle racing, the Kiwis in the America's Cup in the San Francisco Bay Area from the beginning of September until the races were over in later September, the radiation levels on my Gamma Scout Geiger counter. Gamma Scout is a German Geiger counter. It's very accurate and it's very good. And the radiation levels fluctuated between 0.29 and nearly 0.38 becquerels. That's disintegrations per second. That's a 4 times increase in the radiation levels in the month of September. Right. Over the post Fukushima levels that we've been reading.
And what was the baseline prior to Fukushima again?
Oh, it was 0.07 to 0.13.
Right. Right. Now, um, one of the main things that strikes one, apart from the horror of the deformities and the unnecessary death rate, um, is the fact that there is such a complete lack of information on public health, on radiation levels, on measures that the public should take to
To
protect
protect itself.
themselves,
That's right.
coming from the government, either the government of the United States, the government of any of the states, California, uh, the government of Canada, the government of British Columbia. What's going on there?
Well, it's real simple. It's a global conspiracy by government, politicians, government, medical experts, and government scientists. It is definitely a global conspiracy. And this is not the first time. They did it during bomb testing, and then they did it again during the promotion of nuclear power. So there's nothing new about this. Um, Now, I do have a report. It's actually an interview, which you can put the link up with this interview. It was last week, mid October, that I did an interview with Yumi Kikuchi and Gen Morita. And they are probably the most famous activists in Japan. I've worked with them since the year 2000, and they organized 20 speaking tours for me. And on one of them, I took Dr. Ernest Sternglass, who helped Kennedy convince the Senate to ratify the Partial Test Ban Treaty in 1963 and end atmospheric testing because it was killing so many American babies and children. And I think many people who were around at that time remember how much difficulty Jackie Kennedy had carrying a full-time baby. And then, of course, she had one right after they moved into the White House, a little boy named Patrick, who died within days. It really was a tragedy. It's very heartbreaking. And now, the very last Kennedy left from that family, the of Jack and Jackie's children, is Caroline Kennedy, who has just been appointed U.S. ambassador to Japan. So there she is being shipped off for the radiation treatment, which will end up affecting her health. And she'll probably die from radiation exposure as a result of taking that office in Japan. Now, what Yumi and Gen had just come back from the Tokyo Peace Film Festival. It was the 10th anniversary. I've been to some of them. They are wonderful. They collect films during the year from young people, from professional filmmakers, from various sources, and they show them for a couple of days. And they had over 1,000 people. It was 1,100 people. It's the biggest response they've had yet. It was very, very well received, and there were some Fukushima films that were particularly poignant and very, very interesting. But I think most of them are in Japanese. Some of them are in English. I can send you some links to the reviews and so forth on those. Yumi and Gen have started an organization called Fukushima Kids Hawaii Project. FKHP is the acronym for this organization. And what they're doing is finding families to host children and their mothers or their parents to come out of the Fukushima contaminated area and have a month to 3 months away from that area where they live, they're forced to live there because the government won't move them, evacuate them, and these children cannot go outside to play. Many of them, something like a third of them, already have thyroid nodes. So the children of Fukushima are much more affected than children in other regions and populations in Japan. What the medical studies have shown and what they reported to me is that children who can get away from this constant invasive point source of radiation, if they can get away 1 to 3 months a year, it improves their health and their mental state immensely, and the mothers as well. So this is a really wonderful organization. I'm going to send you the link to our interview, and the website is posted all throughout that interview. And I hope people will watch it. They will donate whatever resources they can. And resources don't just mean cash money. There are lots of other ways to help, which sometimes is worth more than money. And if people want to host a family or a mother and a child, that's also very welcome too. What Yumi again told me when I asked them, what is the state of awareness of the Japanese people and how are they responding to this horrific disaster? Their answer was that people are never mention it, hardly ever mention it. It's not in the media. And people are just going about their lives as they always did before. But I think people are also aware that there is a constant sort of dynamic to the radiation. It's not ever going to go away. And sometimes it's higher than other times, but it's a constant now in Japan. I asked her about how are people responding in terms of protecting themselves from contaminated food and water and internal exposure to radiation, the Fukushima radiation. And they said that there is a doctor who specialized in the macrobiotic diet, and he gave the people around him, his family, the people working for him, and so forth, the macrobiotic diet and recommended that they eat a lot of brown rice, ume, which is the salty plum paste, what was another one? Brown rice. Oh, miso soup, very salty also. They said fermented foods are particularly effective against ingested radiation exposure, and they also said that the Japanese pickles are part of that diet as well. So there you have the macrobiotic diet, and she said that the people who stayed on that diet with this particular doctor had no radiation illnesses or symptoms of iodine radioactive iodine affecting their thyroid. And they seem to be fine. That was also used on the Hiroshima and Nagasaki victims and the doctors and personnel treating them. It was very effective. She also said that the people in the Fukushima area, same area around this macrobiotic doctor, who ate Western food, many of them got sick and got cancer. So we are what we eat, and there are ways to avoid the horrific illnesses caused by radiation. And we should really do very simple things that are in our kitchen or at the grocery store that we can afford, and they're the most effective way to fight it. Another thing that several people have told me is that when your hair starts falling out from the radiation exposure, you especially notice it in the shower, or if you're starting to have maybe in a bald spot on your head, symptoms of skin cancer, they poured iodine onto the scalp and rubbed it into the areas that seemed to be starting to have skin cancer. Scabs formed on the bald spots where it looked like cancer was starting, and then this crust would come off, and new skin was underneath. With the iodine on the scalp for people losing their hair, the iodine prevented further hair loss. So these are some of the wisdom, the ancient wisdom of the Japanese, and we can share this with friends and try it at home, and it's very, very effective. So why not?
Do you do you have any estimates of what the uh, unnecessary death levels might be in the U.S. or in any other countries now in these recent years, say 2012 or 2013, for Fukushima? Would it be greater or lesser than the 100,000?
Oh, it's going to increase exponentially every year. So if you take 100,000 and you multiply it by 150 countries, there are different sizes and everything, of course. You're well over a million people who had died by Christmas of 2011. Um, that doesn't count the unborn embryos and fetuses that die in utero and are reabsorbed by the body or rejected. They just leave the body, and it doesn't count for the long-term effects on the children who were exposed, who were maybe babies or toddlers or even in the womb when Fukushima happened. That's going to probably be the greatest exponential increase in symptoms of illnesses and the biological effects of Fukushima as time goes on, because the unborn and the newborn are the most susceptible to ionizing radiation.
What do you recommend for parents who are thinking about having a child, or who have small children, or who have a family with, children of any age?
Well, it's what we expected to be our birthright, was to be able to reproduce, and that's certainly not a fact anymore. It's not a realistic expectation because the infertility has increased so much, so steeply and so rapidly. And what we see from the in vitro fertilization articles that I mentioned earlier is that wild reproduction is becoming a rarer option than it has been in the past. So more and more people will have to go to the hospital to be able to have children and to be able to get pregnant through the in vitro fertilization technology and other things they'll develop as well. But wild reproduction is no longer an option. It's not a guaranteed option.
And uh, is there any way, technically, of stopping Fukushima as a source of ongoing radiation? Technically.
Well, there were measures that science teams, radiation teams visiting Fukushima in the weeks after it happened recommended to TEPCO and the Japanese government. And there was a Russian team sent over who dealt with Chernobyl. They would probably know the most. There were American teams, US teams. I think there was a French team. They had many international advisors who volunteered and went over, and TEPCO did not follow any of their recommendations. They did the opposite. They did exactly what they needed to do and not do in order for the molten fuel to penetrate deeper and deeper subsurface into the underground region. And when it hit the water table at the end of August or middle of August, that's when radioactive steam started coming out of cracks in the ground between the reactors. And of course, it's melted down even more now because that hot fuel that's fissioning remains hot. It gets even hotter. In the fission process, so it continues melting down through the rock and whatever the sediment, the geologic environment is. It's basically the China syndrome. What should have happened, what was recommended at least by, I believe, the Russians, was that they dig holes all around these reactors that were going that were in this disaster, and put small nuclear bombs in those holes and blow the entire platform that the nuclear power plant was sitting on, the geologic platform, into the ocean. That would have cooled the rods, the spent fuel rods that were stored in pools of water. It would have stopped the fissioning of the material in the reactors, although most of it had dripped out before even the next morning after the tsunami. And the rest of it was, the response was simply street theater. It was looking busy. It was dragging fire trucks up there and shooting fire hoses full of seawater on the reactors. Very, very ineffective steps, but they had to at least make it look like they were doing something. Now, the very saddest thing of all is that I saw photos of the Emperor and the Empress of Japan just weeks after the disaster. They had been flown by helicopter through the contaminated, highly contaminated air column that contained radiation levels 300 times higher than after Chernobyl. They were flying through 300 Chernobyls without safety gear or anything. They were put in a helicopter and flown up to the disaster area for media shots of the Emperor and Empress standing in a debris field, looking in shock at what had just happened in northern Japan. And I said, oh my God, that's going to affect their health. And by November or December of 2011, the emperor was in the hospital with heart trouble, and the daughter of the crown prince and crown princess, they had also been flown or forced to go to northern Japan for their summer vacation following Fukushima. And of course, they were all exposed as well. And the little daughter of the crown prince, less than 10 years old, was in the hospital with the emperor. She had radiation-related illnesses. So this just goes to show that this is a depopulation agenda. There's no doubt about it now. And whether you're rich or poor or a king or a queen or an emperor or the lowliest, whatever, little fisherman in some warmed sea, no one can escape this disaster and the impact of this disaster on their own lives and health. And what has just happened in Berkeley, California, which is the global capital of the depopulation agenda, is that Janet Napolitano, who was governor of Arizona, then she got a jet ride to Secretary of Homeland Security, which is the Phoenix program in Vietnam. So it's to destroy domestic resistance to the disaster that's coming perpetrated by our own government on American people. And she has now been hired by the University of California as the new president. And as people may or may not know, the University of California has historically been the sole contract holder of the contract to run the nuclear weapons labs at Los Alamos and Livermore. Los Alamos is in New Mexico, and Livermore is in California, not far from Berkeley. And that is where the Los Alamos is where the Manhattan Project started in World War II, that produced the first atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we know from, I can tell from the health statistics that I've collected from governments all over the world, that since World War II, since those atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the death rates and illnesses post World War II, long lingering illnesses, chronic illnesses like diabetes, MS, Alzheimer's, all kinds of illnesses that have just ballooned, has been caused, have increased also with the introduction of each nuclear technology. So Iraq and Afghanistan bombings, that radioactive dust is offshore, it's onshore, along the Pacific coastline in California within a week or two of those bombs being dropped in Iraq and Afghanistan. And what is Janet Napolitano's job? What is her agenda while she's here serving as president of the University of California? Well, her agenda is to merge the nuclear weapons program into Homeland Security. And the U.S. will not be the only player in that merger. A new article that just came out announced that Russia and the U.S. have just signed an agreement to expand and increase nuclear weapons and the development of nuclear weapons in a laboratory in California. That means the Lawrence Berkeley lab. I'm sorry, the Lawrence Livermore lab. And it's very clear that this is definitely a depopulation agenda, and that nuclear materials will be used to target populations, regions, to do land grabs, to take land back to countries such as Russia. They want their traditional lands back, or colonies, or whatever you want to call it. And right now, Russia is focused on the Baltic states. The Baltic Sea is one of the most contaminated regions in the U.S., and that borders the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. And I met an Estonian woman on the bus in Berkeley this year, and she told me that 5 million ethnic Russians have been moved into the country that she is from. I think it was Estonia. And they are planning to take over those Baltic states and return them to Russia.
Right. Well, let's kind of step back a second. If this nuclear ionizing radiation, cumulative now from atmospheric tests, depleted atmospheric tests in the 50s, 60s, 70s, then depleted uranium bombing in the 80s, 90s, 21st century, and now...
And exotic nuclear weapons and the bunker busters.
Yeah, the bunker busters. And now the Fukushima event added to nuclear power, which was a kind of a soft nuclear war against the local population. Is there a future for the human race as we know it, for the human genome?
Well, the human genome, in fact, the entire biosphere has been altered since 1945, even before that, with these man-made radiation exposures or releases. And from what I'm seeing, from what I've been involved in, from what I've studied, from the 50 countries I've visited educating people, about the dangers, environmental and public health dangers and consequences of exposure to ionizing radiation. I'm absolutely convinced now with this announcement that Russia and the US are going to intensify the development of nuclear weapons. Well, they have an excuse, and the excuse is they need them to put them in space to take out asteroids that might hit the Earth, but that's not what it's for. They're on a global depopulation agenda through nuclear pollution, and that is absolutely a fact. There's no way they can deny it, or anyone can, if they're informed and they've looked at the facts.
But if nuclear pollution has knows no boundaries and does not distinguish among peoples, then to whose benefit is this? That is, you're going to have a deformed remnant of the human race left. So why is this an effective way to depopulate?
Well, radiation respects no borders, it respects no socioeconomic interests,
Right,
and it respects no religion. It's
right.
a global, equal opportunity killer. And it's been released once it's out of the test tube or out of the ground or out of the phosphate deposit or wherever it's mined. Once it's out of the bombs, the bullets, and the nukes, it just goes where the winds carry it, and the dynamic processes in the troposphere. The ground releases of small amounts of radiation from these mini nukes and bunker busters and so forth. The nuclear power plants are actually the most lethal and the most effective way to carry out nuclear war, because almost 100%, 95% that's released into the atmosphere from the ground is rained out within 2.5 months. With the big nuclear bomb tests during the 50s and 60s, the radiation released into the atmosphere, 85% is still up there. It has not come down from lower orbital space in the higher regions of the atmosphere. It's still up there because there are no storms and rain and snow and tornadoes and hurricanes and so forth to remove it from that region. So actually, the nuclear bomb test effects, they're still up there for the most part. But with the depleted uranium released on the battlefield on and off, with nuclear power plants releasing daily into the air, and with these new exotic nuclear weapons, as well as Fukushima, oh my God, it's over 300 Chernobyls. That's blowing right across the Pacific. It's riding right across the Pacific on the tsunami debris field, and it's washing up already along the Pacific coastline. It means the entire northern Pacific is contaminated and nothing should be eaten out of it, because animals and seaweed, living things, plankton, everything, bioconcentrate the radiation to hundreds and thousands of times higher levels in those organisms than the water contaminated, the contaminated water that they're living in, and removing the radiation from that.
Exactly. So isn't this an extermination rather than an attempted extermination rather than an attempted depopulation?
It's depopulation to benefit the financiers and the money people. It's land grabs. It's um, it's it's extinction. It's extermination. It's homicide, suicide, genocide, omnicide. It's all of it. It's a global death agenda.
Yeah. So, but what's going to be left for the controllers?
Only God knows that.
Yeah. Now, uh, some people have said the alternative that perhaps there's an off-planet force that is terraforming the Earth using this to occupy it. What do you think about that hypothesis?
Um, I'm sort of looking at it through the perspective and the lens of geoscience from
Right.
what my expertise is. And what I see is a completely contaminated biosphere and atmosphere on this planet, which will change uh, the form of life. It's contaminated and altered the DNA of all living things already. Thank God that 95% of the biomass on this planet is bacteria. And some of it is deep in the earth, deep under the ice at the poles. Um, some of some organisms will survive, but it's going to be an extinction in many areas and extermination. But it's a slow form of nuclear war.
Okay, now let me ask you this to look at some possible positive outcomes. I know I'm kind of digging for them here. Do you know of any existing technologies or promising avenues of technology that, if one could get through the sabotage of the New World Order, technologies that could reverse the effects of the ionizing radiation of Fukushima, depleted uranium, bomb testing, that whole nuclear agenda?
Well, it's already happened. People, for instance, are looking in plants and animals and other organisms to see how they respond and survive and what protector molecules they've developed over the millennia, over millions and billions of years, to protect themselves from the ionizing radiation coming from the sun and that occur naturally in rocks on this planet. Uranium is in many minerals that form rocks. And um, it's amazing, it's astounding what people did in around Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I know some of the doctors, I know some of the survivors who were there. And the doctors were ingenious. They had no medical supplies. What they used for blood when they did blood transfusions was um, liquid seaweed. They used the juice from seaweed, which mimics human blood, and they pumped that into the patients through their veins, and it oxygenated their blood and acted as an artificial blood replacement. They kept the patients alive with that. The macrobiotic diet came out of that. And there are many, many things. There were many good benefits. This is a tragedy, of course, and it will affect many, many people, millions and billions of people. But it's also an opportunity that can transform and change our lives. And we each need to find what works for us or what resources are near us that we can use. And the best people to talk to are about disease and curing it are the Indigenous people, the First Nation people of Canada, the American Indians, the Indians of Mexico and South America, the Ainu of Japan, the Mongolians. They all have the Hawaiians, the Pacific Islanders. They all have medical protocols to treat diseases that such as diabetes, such as cancer, such as whatever. They have found plants, the root bark off of certain plants, leaves, fruits, whatever, needles from the trees, and they have used these traditionally for millions of years, for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, to treat illnesses, and they do it because they work. And basically, illness in a body, in an organ, is simply the tissues, the cells are off of the correct frequency they need to be on for that organ or that part of the body to function properly. These natural herbs, leaves, plant material, whatever they use, restore the diseased tissue to the right frequency and create wellness. Western medicine doesn't do that. It masks the symptoms. It does not restore health and treat the real illness. We also need to boost our immune system, and that is the macrobiotic diet, as well as energy exercises like Tai Chi and um, yoga, things like that, really do help to restore the proper frequencies in the body.
Okay. Well, we've covered a great deal of ground, a lot of it quite sober. Uh, what final thoughts would you like to leave our viewers about the future?
Well, to quote you, Alfred, it's nothing personal. It's just another industry like making shoes. That's one of the most profound quotes that I use over and over again because that's just how it is. It sums it up in one sentence. That was a brilliant insight, and I thank you for it. This is nothing personal. This is just psychopaths trying to make more money by harvesting living things around them and mining everything they can out of the ground. Um, they they don't care. They're not like us. They have different thoughts, values. God is their God, but it's gold, oil, and drugs. It's not spirituality, vitality, and love. It's something much darker. And I think as this tragedy progresses, people will reach into their spiritual energy because it's greater, it's mightier, and it's the only way to fight this darkness. And as Martin Luther King said, um, he said, the spirit is mightier than any military armies.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us again and giving us this update. And we hope that you will join us from time to time and update us as the situation progresses.
Well, I'm really looking forward to our next interview and a series of interviews. And by the way, when can we do another one, Alfred?
Soon, soon.
Well, thank all the people listening. Thank you for supporting us and following our information interviews. And I want to thank Alfred and Yumi again for being a great supporter for me. Um, I just wouldn't be doing it with what I'm doing without the help of other people. And Alfred, you and Gen and Yumi and others have been tremendous. I'd also like to thank Marion Falk, the Manhattan Project scientist, who taught me over a 10-year period about the proper way to find the information, to analyze it, to present it to the public. And he said, just remember, all governments are terrorist organizations.
Profound thoughts. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alfred. Bye.
Bye bye.